You should have evolved faster. That was the last thing the High Arbiter of the Zala Dominion said before the transmission cut. His elongated face stretched in amusement, his 4 narrow eyes gleaming with a condescension so thick it could suffocate a lesser species. Behind him, his council of sycophants let out a chorus of chittering laughter, their mandibles clacking in unison. Humans had heard it all before. Hairless apes, dirt crawlers, a cosmic accident barely worthy of notice. But now, with Earth's fleets routed, Mars occupied, and the colonies burning, the Dominion had stopped pretending to take humanity seriously. And so, the war was over. That was the message. Humanity's end was inevitable. Captain Elias Ward didn't see it that way. Inside the dim command chamber of the Reckoner, Ward leaned forward, fingers steepled as he studied the flickering holo map. It showed what remained of the Tan Fleet, less than 1/10 of its original strength, ragged, scattered, licking wounds that wouldn't heal in time. The Dominion's fleets tightened around Sue, blockading the last ember of human resistance. Tactical analysts predicted surrender within 3 standard cycles. Some were more optimistic, giving it 5. Ward knew better. Humanity had days. Fleet Marshal Hendrick exhaled, his breath slow and measured, but his shoulders sagged. The other commanders, what was left of them, had already started whispering about options, about negotiations, about surviving rather than winning. Ward's voice cut through the room like a plasma round. "We're not going to surrender." General Torrens scowled. The man was older, a veteran of the first Zala skirmishes decades ago. He had fought bravely, but bravery meant nothing when the war had already been lost. "And what would you have us do, Ward?" His voice was weary. "We don't have the ships. We don't have the numbers. We don't have—" "Time," Ward finished for him. "I know." He glanced around the room. "But we have something else." Admiral Kane folded his arms. "Enlighten us." Ward activated a secondary holomap. A single celestial body appeared, Incar 3, the Dominion homeworld, and next to it, glowing with the slow fury of a dying god, its sun. "This is our answer." There was a long silence. Then Torren laughed, short and sharp, as if Ward had cracked a joke. "You want to kill their son?" Ward met his gaze. "Yes." More silence. Kane rubbed a hand across his face, as if trying to wipe away the sheer audacity of the statement. Hendrick said nothing at all, his gaze locked on the hologram. The others exchanged looks, uncertain whether Ward had gone insane, or if he had simply decided that sanity no longer mattered. Torren shook his head. "Even if we could, we can," Ward cut him off. "Project Dawnfire was shut down years ago, but the research is still there. The tech is feasible. We just never built it because we didn't need to." He leaned forward. "Now we do." Admiral Kane, the most pragmatic among them, spoke up. "And how exactly do you plan on getting this weapon into position?" Ward tapped another point on the map. "We still have 6 Helios-class carriers. They were designed for deep space ordnance transport. We modify them, fit them with the payload, and send them in under stealth cover. The Dominion's border fleets are strong, but they're not expecting this. Their defences are built to repel conventional assaults, not," he gestured to the star, "planetary annihilation." Torren's face twisted. "It's genocide." Ward met his gaze without hesitation. "And what do you think they're doing to us?" Silence again, but different this time. The kind of silence that came when men stood at the edge of something dark and inevitable. Admiral Kane exhaled. "What are the odds of success?" Ward's lips barely twitched. "Near 0. Kane nodded. "Then I say we do it." Torrens swore. "This is madness." "No," Hendrick finally spoke, his voice steady. "This is war." Within the hour, orders were given. Crews mobilized, the last engineers of humanity, men who had seen their families wiped out by orbital bombardments, worked without rest. Helios-class carriers, once meant for peaceful expansion, were stripped down, rebuilt, reborn as vessels of destruction. They would never return from this mission. That was understood. And still, they went. The Helios fleet launched under the cover of dead space. No broadcast, no heat trails. Just 6 ships drifting through the abyss, their emissions masked by signal decoys and scrap debris fields. The Dominion had the numbers, the weapons, the territory. But they had never needed to hide. Humanity had been hiding for years. It was the one advantage left. Ward sat in the dimly lit war room aboard the Reckoner, eyes locked on the slow-moving display. Each Helios ship was represented by a blinking marker creeping along an indirect trajectory toward Inara 3. No form, no pattern. They looked like the remnants of a shattered fleet, an illusion reinforced by false distress signals trailing in their wake. To the Dominion, it would appear as though scattered human vessels were limping through deep space, broken and beaten. They would not see the knives until it was too late. "Latest report," Admiral Kane muttered. His voice was quiet, but the room felt the weight of every syllable. 3 Dominion patrols passed within 100,000 clicks of Helios 1, the operations officer reported, no sign they noticed. Ward nodded. That was the dangerous part. The Dominion had long assumed humanity had exhausted its ability to retaliate. They expected guerrilla strikes, not strategic annihilation. General Torrin, standing near the back, exhaled slowly. "They won't ignore them forever." "They won't have to," Ward replied. His fingers tightened slightly. "They just need to ignore them long enough." The plan relied on an assumption that the Dominion's arrogance ran as deep as its condescension. No alarms had been raised. No emergency war councils convened. As far as the Zala were concerned, this war was already over. It was only when Helios 3 was intercepted that things changed. "Unidentified Dominion cruiser on intercept course," came the warning. Every eye turned to the holomap as a new red marker emerged. It was moving fast, too fast. Ward's pulse slowed. "Evacuation protocol?" "They're engaging," the operations officer answered. "Helios 3 is running a burn toward Inara 3. They're committing to the mission." "They won't make it," Torrin muttered. Ward already knew that. He watched in silence as Helios 3 sent its final transmission. No words, just a data burst containing one last update on Dominion patrol routes. Then the ship was gone, reduced to a scattering of light against the dark. A moment passed before Kane spoke. "They did their job," Ward nodded once. "We do ours." They adjusted trajectories based on Helios 3's final message, threading the remaining ships through gaps in the Dominion's net. 4 Helios-class vessels pressed forward. The silence returned, thick and waiting. Hours passed, then a day. The markers moved, then the alarm shrieked. "Dominion Warfleet mobilizing," Ward shot to his feet. The holomap flared with sudden movement, dozens of enemy signatures breaking from standard patrol routes, converging toward Helios 1, 4, and 6. "They've been found," the operations officer said, voice strained. "Stealth is compromised. Orders." Ward turned to Kane. The Admiral didn't hesitate. "We improvise." The Dominion had been slow to react, but now that they understood the humans' movements, they were closing in fast. Escape was impossible. It was time for the contingency plan. "Helios 1 and 4 course correction." Ward's voice was cold. "Push toward Inara 3 at maximum burn, now." The orders were acknowledged instantly. Engines flared. The ships didn't try to evade. They surged forward like arrows let loose, blazing toward the Dominion's home system. The Zala Warfleet adjusted, but something was wrong. A new cluster of Dominion ships peeled away, moving at a sharp angle. "They're splitting forces," Torrin said in confusion. "What are they chasing?" Faint then, Ward saw it. Helios 6. The last ship had broken away from the others, veering in a separate direction, broadcasting a powerful signal burst. "Decoy maneuver," Kane muttered. They're drawing fire, volunteering for a death. Sentence, Torin added, his jaw tightened. Damn fools! But it was working. The Dominion sensors would see a massive energy surge, something Helios 6 had intentionally rigged to appear as if it carried the primary payload. The Dominion took the bait. Half the warfleet turned to intercept, breaking formation to chase the perceived threat. The others still pursued Helios 1 and 4, but the response was now fractured, uncoordinated. Ward watched Helios 6 vanish from the map. Then he spoke. They just gave us a chance. A long pause followed. No one spoke of Helios 6 again. The two remaining ships tore through the last stretch of open space. Inara 3's sun now dominated their viewports. The homeworld was within range. It was time. The final approach was silent. Helios 1 and Helios 4 burned toward Inara 3's star at maximum velocity, their hulls glowing from the immense radiation. Behind them, the Dominion fleet scrambled. Some ships had realized the deception too late, attempting desperate course corrections. Others still pursued Helios 6's wreckage, chasing ghosts. The scattered response had bought humanity's last weapons the time they needed. Ward's fingers tightened as he watched the holomap. The Dominion's home system loomed, their fleets reacting too sluggishly, their arrogance having slowed them down. But time was running out. A second wave of Dominion warships, fresh and undistracted, had launched from Inara 3 itself, closing the distance fast. "We're losing the window," Kane muttered. "They'll intercept before the payload is fully deployed." Ward exhaled. There was only one move left. Detonate early. The command room stilled. Torrin's head snapped toward him. "That's suicide for Helios 1 and 4. Ward's voice was calm. They knew that when they left. There was no argument. The comms officer transmitted the final directive. Helios 1 and 4 accelerated, pushing their reactors beyond safety thresholds. Inside those ships, men braced for the inevitable. Their mission had never been to survive. The Dominion's last warships opened fire, the void filled with lance fire cutting through the black. Plasma beams scored direct hits on Helios 1's engines. The ship began to spin out of control. The crew did not attempt to correct it. Instead, they engaged the failsafe. A message was received aboard Helios 4. Detonating payload. See you on the other side. Then Helios 1 ceased to exist. A moment later, reality split apart. The experimental payload, originally conceived as a means of stellar engineering, had never been designed for war. The human engineers had changed that. Now it was a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The sun at the heart of Inara 3 shuddered. A wave of energy erupted outward, a rippling shockwave that bent space itself. Dominion ships caught in the blast vanished in an instant, reduced to atoms. The Zalar home system, once stable and ancient, began to die. The sun flared in violent spasms, its fusion cycle thrown into chaos. Ward watched the readings on the holomap. The Dominion's homeworld was now a world of the dead. Kane let out a slow breath. Torrin stared at the display, unmoving. The war was over. The Zalar Dominion, once the undisputed rulers of the Orion Arm, had lost everything in a single moment. Ward turned away from the display. Begin the recall. The surviving Terran ships, battered and barely holding together, started their retreat. The Dominion still had ships, still had colonies. But their civilization had been built around Inara 3. Their fleets would scatter. Their power would collapse. Ward let his shoulders drop slightly. Humanity had been written off as primitive apes. They called them a species barely worth consideration. Now the galaxy would remember them forever. In the weeks following the battle, the galaxy's silence was deafening. The once boisterous Dominion channels that filled the void with their proclamations and taunts had gone utterly quiet. The great Zalar fleets that had swept through human colonies like a plague of locusts were now in shambles, their command structure shattered. The surviving Dominion vessels, those that had managed to escape the catastrophic event at Inara 3, were aimless, leaderless, adrift. As the Terran fleets limped back to Sol, what remained of the Earth's government convened in the still smoking ruins of their capital. From behind makeshift screens and charred council tables, human leaders debated what to do next. For years, they had lived under the shadow of extinction, and now, for the first time, that shadow had lifted. The Zila were broken, their sun a faint remnant of its former glory. The question was no longer how to survive, but what kind of future humanity would build. There was no shortage of opinions. "We've done the impossible," one of the younger generals said, still clutching a bloodied arm. "We've proved we're not the apes they called us. But now we need to ensure we never face this kind of threat again." A scientist, one of the few remaining architects of the Dawnfire project, spoke next, her voice trembling from exhaustion. "The universe has just witnessed what we're capable of. We didn't just defeat an enemy. We turned a star into a weapon. We have a responsibility to ensure that knowledge isn't used recklessly." Torren, the grizzled general, who had opposed the plan from the start, now stood in silent reflection. He had been wrong. He knew that now. But the weight of what they had done, the lives lost, the line crossed, was etched on his face. "We have to rebuild," he said finally, "and we have to rebuild better. The Dominion may not be finished, but neither are we. This can't be the end of our story." Ward, the man who had carried humanity's hope on his shoulders, listened in silence. When the debate subsided, all eyes turned to him. "Everyone out." The room hesitated. Ward repeated himself, his voice firm, and the council slowly filed out. Alone in the chamber, he approached the terminal. A simple holographic interface flickered to life, displaying a classified file. It bore the insignia of the Earth Defense Council, followed by a single word: Stellaris. The plan had been drafted years before the war began, a contingency to ensure humanity's survival in the face of overwhelming odds. It was never implemented, considered too risky, too extreme. But now the conditions were different. The Zela threat had changed everything. Ward read the file silently. If enacted, Project Stellaris would shift the focus of humanity's entire spacefaring effort. It wasn't just about rebuilding, it was about transformation. Colonies wouldn't just be rebuilt, they would be fortified into bastions of self-sufficient life. The remaining fleet wouldn't just defend Sol, it would become an expeditionary force, ready to strike at any future threat. Most importantly, the lessons learned from the war, tactical deception, engineering ingenuity, and the terrifying potential of stellar manipulation, would be integrated into humanity's DNA. It wasn't a blueprint for a new era of peace, it was a blueprint for resilience. Ward's finger hovered over the activation command. He thought of the faces of the Helios crews, their willingness to die for humanity's future. He thought of Earth's battered landscapes, scarred, yet still alive. And he thought of the Zela's mocking laughter before the war had turned. They had seen apes. They had seen primitives. They had underestimated a species willing to do the unthinkable. Ward pressed the command. The file flashed once before encrypting itself again, its instructions cascading through every surviving Terran system. Project Stellaris was now active. Weeks later, as humanity's surviving ships docked at the last functional spaceports, a new slogan began circulating among the crew, a phrase etched into the panels of the surviving Helios vessels, spoken by men and women who had endured the unendurable. Apes no more.